on, vinyl community? Welcome to another video with the Record Spinner. It's the beginning of a new year. That means it is vinyl tag season. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing the youngest members of the VC edition of the 2024 vinyl tag. Now, for those that are living under a rock, the yearly vinyl tag is a series of 20 prompts and questions to showcase one's record collection. And it's often a great starting point for any new YouTube vinyl community members to start making videos. And for a number of years, it was always run by Tales from the Crate, who always had compiled the list of 20 questions, and then everybody would just make their own videos. But since he has kind of disappeared from the vinyl community at large, the vinyl tag has kind of morphed into whatever it wants to be for any given person. So myself and my good friends over at the youngest members of the VC, which consists of myself, Emma at 8 Vinyl Low, Marican at Marican's Music, and Jenna at Spins and Needles, we all put our brains together and we came up with a list of 20 prompts that we felt were pretty cool for our own special tag. But not just for us, it is also for everyone else there that is watching to take part in. So please, we do encourage you guys to take part in this tag, as well as other tags that are being done by other members of the VC. You know, it's all about spreading the love and wealth. So without further ado, there are 20 prompts in this tag. So without further ado, let's jump into what this video is all about. Number 1, show a New Orleans related record. So if you are a fan of the youngest members of the VC, you probably are aware that every year since 2021, we do our yearly summer trips where we go to a major city, check out all the record stores, as well as all the notable sites and attractions of the given cities that we visit. And I always have the honor of assembling the documentaries that chronicle our travels, and they're up on my channel if you want to peel back and check those out. Some of them are quite long. One is relatively not so long, so they're definitely not little bite-sized videos to watch. Definitely have a couple of cups of coffee on hand when you watch them. But this past year in 2023, we went to New Orleans, and I'm actually curious if some of the other members of the group are going to show this record, because this is a record that outside of myself, I know that Marican and Emma had purchased, and that is the Preservation Hall Jazz Band, A Tuba to Cuba. So Preservation Hall was one of the many cool places that we were able to check out. This little shoebox jazz club, all packed in, no phones, no nothing. It was just such an electrifying experience, and it just completely immersed you into the jazz realm. And the band itself was absolutely fantastic. And this particular record was being sold at the gift shop that was just right outside of the main hall. So kind of as a moment of impulse and as a way to remember that one specific highlight of the trip, I picked up this record, and just holds a lot of great memories in the great city of New Orleans. Number 2, an album that describes how your 2023 went. So this record is actually one that I picked up on that same trip with the youngest members from New Orleans, except we finished things off in Nashville. So I got this at Grimey's, and that is Chris Bell, I Am the Cosmos. Chris Bell, of course, was in Big Star, and this is an album of various recordings that he had worked on before his passing in the late 70s, and this album didn't come out until the early 90s. And with the songs on this record, there are feelings of spirituality, finding faith, finding love, coming to terms with things. And I feel like that is how the previous year in 2023 kind of was for me. It was a very transformative period, making sense of things, finding new love. And I can honestly pinpoint most songs on this record and kind of allude it to a chapter in how my year sort of went. So it's an absolutely gorgeous record from beginning to end. When I did my Apple Music Wrapped, this was an album that got frequents quite often as I listened to it so many times on the way to work and during my travels. But if I had to pick an album that described how my year went, it's this special album here. Number 3, best release of 2023. So out of all the albums that came out this past year that I really enjoyed, one that I loved particularly was Courtney Barnett's End of the Day. Now, this is a soundtrack album to her documentary Anonymous Club. And with this, it's very much a traditional soundtrack album in the sense that it's basically a score. So you have these little instrumentals all woven together that consist of synthesizers and very ethereal guitars. And if you're a fan of, let's say, Berlin era David Bowie type stuff when he was working with, Brian Eno and this and that, this is an album that I think that you will really enjoy. There are just such beautiful moments on this record that are so ethereal. It gets you in a certain mindset. Then there's those brief moments of tension, but then they quickly resolve themselves. And it's just such a pleasing listen. This is also an album that I reviewed on trackingangle.com, Michael Fremer's website. Little shameless plug there. And it's just an absolutely beautiful album, and it's one that got a lot of rotation when it came out this past year in 2023. Number 4, an artist you saw live in 2023. So one of the best shows I went to this past year was Olivia Jean at Milk Boy in Philadelphia in May of 2023. Olivia Jean might now be best known for being Jack White's most recent wife, but she has been on his label Third Man for a number of years as a session player. She was in the Black Bells, has done several solo records, and this one in particular, which came out last year, it's called Raving Ghost, is an absolutely killer album from start to finish. I would say it's probably her best one. But it was a fantastic show at Milk Boy. I was right at the front of the stage, basically front row. It was tight. It was loud. It was everything one loves about live entertainment in such a tight and yet intimate type setting. And while I already had the album in my collection prior to the show taking place, I have the indie version in my collection behind me. This right here is the standard black copy, and the only reason why I picked this up was just so she had something to sign after the show. And since I had a nice sweet spot right in front of her on-stage monitors, right when the show was done, I just reached over and grabbed her handwritten set list, which serves as a very nice souvenir to have that I have stored inside of the jacket. But yeah, like I said, I think it honestly is a contender for probably the best show that I saw last year. Number 5, an album you bought at a concert/show. So I'm going to go in the same vein as the Olivia Jean show that I just mentioned. Another band that I saw live this past year was Ghost, and this right here is their latest EP, Phantomime. They kind of sprinkle in some covers EPs from time to time. This one has covers from Television, Genesis, The Stranglers, Iron Maiden, and Tina Turner. They honestly reinvent some of this work just absolutely brilliantly, and this is probably one of my favorite EP releases of theirs. But this pressing that I have right here is the tour exclusive pressing because, granted, I already have one of the web store versions. I have the Impera box set, which has a variant of that in there. But this tour exclusive comes pressed on sort of Coke bottle clear vinyl. And personally, I love buying vinyl at shows simply because they certainly will last longer than the $40 to $50 t-shirt that ultimately wears out with time, or the $20 beer that basically leaves as soon as it comes in. So always a big crowd pleaser to buy vinyl at shows. Number 6, a 2024 release you're excited about. So the big album release that I am so stoked for this year is Ace Frehley's 10,000 Volts. Of course, Ace Frehley being the original spaceman and guitarist in my favorite band, Kiss. And I've said it before, Ace Frehley has had perhaps the most prolific solo career out of anybody in the Kiss family, especially since 2009, because he has had a string of solid records. There was Anomaly, Space Invader, Spaceman. He also did two covers albums, and now he's pumping out another one that has been really hyped up, and I'm believing all the hype because obviously the first single, the title track, sounds absolutely ass-kicking and in classic Ace territory, and I honestly have no doubt that it's going to be probably one of my favorite new releases to come out this year, but it's certainly, as of filming this video, the most anticipated release coming out this year that I am really stoked for. Number 7, an album from the year you turned 24. So let's see, I was 24 back in 2021. So an album that came out that year that I really love, which also kind of has some interesting ties, just given the theme of this tag and what I've mentioned previously. It is Silver Synthetic. This is their self-titled debut album, which came out on Third Man. And this is a band that's actually from New Orleans. And I picked this album up at Third Man when the youngest members and I first met up in Nashville back in 2021 when this album had first come out. And I kind of bought this on impulse just because this was one of the notable new releases that they were really talking about a lot at the time. But when I listened to it, it was just love at first listen because this is like the archetypal summer album. It's an album where you can put the windows down or the top down, drive on down the highway, and just embrace life. If you are a fan of the Velvet Underground, T-Rex, or Television, you will absolutely knock your socks off with this particular album. Number 8, favorite album turning 50 in 2024. Now, 1974 was a great year with a lot of great albums. You had Aerosmith's Get Your Wings, David Bowie, Diamond Dogs, Genesis, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, Deep Purple's Burn. The list is endless. But one of my favorite albums to come out that year, which also just happens to be my favorite album of this band, is Queen 2. This is their second record, and this is very much a sort of hint in the sort of melodramatic, heavy operatic direction that they would further indulge themselves in with Sheer Heart Attack and, of course, Night at the Opera. Father to Son, White Queen, Someday One Day, which is one of my favorite Brian May tunes. But, of course, you have this almost mini epic on side 2 with Ogre Battle, Fairyfeller's Masterstroke, Nevermore, March of the Black Queen, which I think is almost like the precursor to Bohemian Rhapsody. And then, of course, their first big hit, Seven Seas of Rhye. It's an absolutely sensational listen, very heavy, and yet, like I said, very melodramatic and operatic. It's just absolutely phenomenal. Love this record. Number 9, what would you love to see come out for Record Store Day this year? So for this one, I'm going to focus on a band that I love that always has a release for Record Store Day almost every year, whether it's the actual day itself or Black Friday, and that is The Doors. Now, it seems like in recent years, Doors management has kind of redeemed themselves because the catalog was always handled a bit sort of wonky, let's just say. But recently, we've gotten the release of Paris Blues, which was a long-rumored track to exist, which came out and was marketed as being the final Doors studio track to be released. So that's finally out. Then there was the release of the original first-generation reels of them playing at the Matrix from 1967. Big backstory with all those tapes, faulty like second or third generation tapes that come out previously. They finally put out the real McCoy. And then recently for Black Friday, there was the release of Live in Bakersfield, which was rumored to have come out almost 20 years ago, and they finally pulled the trigger on that. So it seems like they're finally putting out quality stuff. But I'm going to rewind a little bit back to 2016 for Record Store Day. They had put out Live at the Aquarius Theater, the first performance. Now, this was the first of a series of shows that they recorded live to be used on the live album that became Absolutely Live. But there are a number of other shows, such as a second Aquarius show, as well as performances in Philadelphia and Detroit, all of which have come out on Bright Midnight Records on CD around like the late 90s and early 2000s. So how great would it be if they continued what they started with this release and put out all of the other shows on vinyl? And of course, limited quantities, colored vinyl, Record Store Day, it has it all there. But to take it a step further, and like I said, once again, tie it all in, mentioned New Orleans previously, there is a tape out there of the Doors' last ever live performance with Jim Morrison, which was recorded at a venue called The Warehouse in New Orleans. And this was in late 1970. They played some tracks off of LA Woman. And of course, there's the story where Jim basically beat the mic stand into the stage, broke the stage, and that was the last that they ever played live with him. So there is a tape out there of that show. There's a photo of it out there online, and it has never circulated in the bootleg circles. So hopefully someone at Doors Management and Rhino have this thing, and it's somewhere in the pipeline to come out, hopefully for a Record Store Day release or even a standard release. I just think something of that historical nature, regardless of quality, would make for a solid RSD release. Number 10, an album that deserves a box set. So the album that I'm going to discuss is one by my favorite band of all time, and it's another album that's celebrating its 50th birthday this year, and that is Kiss's self-titled debut, one of the greatest debut albums of all time, and one that literally plays like a greatest hits. Strutter, Nothing to Lose, Firehouse, Cold Gin, Deuce, 100,000 Years, Black Diamond. If you were to start with this album, you're off to the races. But as for what a box set could consist of with this album, so of course you get the remastered album, probably the album mixed in 5.1 and Dolby Atmos on a Blu-ray. Give us some outtakes and alternate versions of tracks that were recorded at Bell Sound Studios when this album was being worked on. Of course, the original Eddie Kramer demo from 73. And then as for live stuff, there's the show from the Daisy from 73, back when they were a club band. That exists as a multi-track board recording. Of course, there's several radio broadcasts from the tour in support of this album from Cleveland, Detroit, as well as Memphis. And just aside from audio content, you could give us a hardbound book, a replica press kit, and all the other tchotchkes that, people get in box sets. But rumor has it this is supposed to be in the works and the next box set to come from Kiss, since we already got Destroyer and Creatures of the Night. But supposedly this box, as well as all the Off the Soundboard releases, are being held back because supposedly Gene and Paul are shopping the brand around. So don't know what exactly that means, but hopefully once everything is agreed upon, they can push the resume button and give us these great box sets and other releases. And this is one that I would absolutely love to see in a box set type form. Number 11, most played record in your collection. Now, this was kind of tough because I don't really keep a tally of how many times I've listened to certain records in my collection. And sure, there are some that I can look at and say, yes, I've played that definitely more than once or twice. But one album that kind of comes to mind that I know for a fact I've played, I don't know, let's just say 5 to 10 times perhaps, is King Crimson's In the Court of the Crimson King. This album is the birth of progressive rock as we know it. It is one of the most timeless albums that always maintains its sort of relevancy. Even back when it first came out in 1969, this still sounds so fresh, and it's just the ultimate amalgamation of European classical influences, jazz, as well as what would be considered heavy metal, because you have like the frantic heaviness of 21st Century Schizoid Man, the beautiful tranquil moments of I Talk to the Wind and Moonchild, and then you have these bold mellotron-driven moments like Epitaph and The Court of the Crimson King. It just packs in the essence of Crimson all in this record, and it's one that does quite get a lot of heavy rotation out of all of the records in my collection. Number 12, favorite Lazy Sunday album. Now, typically most Sundays, I'm always working, whether it's, the day job, doing something for the channel, or my other pursuits. But if there was to be a Sunday that I was off and I had time to just put on a record and just feel lackadaisical, I would put on Nick Drake's Pink Moon. And out of Nick Drake's 3 records, this one here I think best represents his artistry. It's literally just him with an acoustic guitar and lead vocal, little piano overdub here and there, but it just packs in the essence of his sound so beautifully and in just under 30 minutes. It's just an album that you can just get lost in when you're listening to it. It's just absolutely beautiful, makes you feel nostalgic. There's a real beauty behind the arrangements of this record, as well as the lyrics, Nick's voice. It's just an all-around beautiful package, and it's a great album to feel lazy to. Number 13, favorite album from your childhood. So for this one, I picked Kaiser Chiefs Employments. Now, Kaiser Chiefs are a band from Leeds in England. Kind of came out around that same time frame where you had bands like The Strokes and Franz Ferdinand kind of making a name in the rock scene. These guys came along at the right time, and they just sort of fit right in. And this is their first record from 2005, but I became a fan later on in 2008 because of the song Ruby, which was in Guitar Hero 3 Legends of Rock. And so I went backwards and checked checked out the two albums that they had, the one that had Ruby, and then this one. And the reason why I chose Employment is because when I listen to this record, I think of my best friend Donovan, who I met on the first day of middle school. And we actually formed a band together at the time that lasted all the way up to high school called Still Pending. And when we started out, we were essentially like a Kaiser Chiefs sort of cover band because we did a lot of their songs, most of which are on this album. And one of the tracks, which actually opens up side 2, is a song called Born to Be a Dancer. And we actually played that song at our first ever live performance at our school talent show. So have a lot of fondness for this album since it does remind me of childhood and brings back a lot of nostalgia. Number 14, an album that you consider to be a hidden gem. So for this one, I chose Blue Ash, No More, No Less. This album came out on Mercury back in 1973, received tons of great reviews by the rock press at the time, but at the same time, it just got lost in the sands of time of the 70s. And it's a shame because I feel like the power pop genre in general back in the 70s always got undermined, and they didn't have the right distribution chains that a lot of bands such as Blue Ash, and I'll even throw in Big Star as well, they didn't get those distribution chains that they rightfully deserve to be considered highly in the pantheon of rock giants from the time frame. This is an absolutely fantastic, fun record. Opening track, Abracadabra, Have You Seen Her, is a great opener. Jim Kenzer, lead vocalist of this group, just has a great rip-roaring voice. And there's a couple of covers on here too, which are good fun. Dusty Old Fairgrounds by Bob Dylan, Anytime at All by the Beatles. This is just a great record, very collectible. This is actually an unofficial press that I found kind of cheap. I don't know how many copies are out there, but if you see this out in the wild, definitely take a chance on it. You will not be disappointed. Number 15, a recommendation you were given that you have fallen in love with. So with this one, I chose Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats' Bloodlust. So the first I had heard of this band was from the drummer of the Genesis tribute band that I work for called The Genesis Show. Guy's name is Vinny. And he was talking about this relatively newer band that basically sounded like Black Sabbath, but with some eerie John Lennon-esque style vocals. So sure enough, I saw this album cover and I heard a small sound sample, kind of registered it in the back of my mind with the intention of buying this album sight unseen if I saw it out in the wild during my record buying travels. And sure enough, at my favorite record store, Sky Valley Records, I saw this, had to pick it up and just dive right in, and it was just love at first listen. This band brings out the more doomier aspects of Black Sabbath sound and just drives it all the way up to not even 11. It drives it up to 12. And the cool thing that matches the great music aesthetics of Uncle Acid are the lyrics. And it seems like each album sort of has a sort of loose concept to it. And with Bloodlust being the album that kind of subjected a lot of fresh listeners, obviously, including myself, they almost have the tinge of like B-tier type horror films from the 70s, and then subsequent albums that I would explore later on beyond this, such as Mind Control, which kind of delves into some sort of Charles Manson-esque type topics, Night Creepers, like a Jack the Ripper style serial killer, and then you have the dystopian overtones of Wasteland. Every album has a little bit of flavor that I think just feeds into just that general sense of occultism, sort of countercultural elements, just absolutely phenomenal stuff. And I'm so glad that I picked this up because Uncle Acid is surely one of my favorite modern bands out there. Number 16, the album that made you fall in love with a specific genre. Now, one of the very few artists out there in the music world that are so multifaceted to have a little bit of variety and spice in their discography, to have something for everybody and explore as much ground as possible, is, of course, Mr. David Bowie, and this is his album Low, which is, again, my favorite Bowie record. And at this point, like I kind of alluded to with the Courtney Barnett record that I referenced earlier in the video, this was when he started to collaborate with Brian Eno. Tony Visconti produced this record, as well as Heroes and Lodger, which makes up the sort of Berlin trilogy of albums that Bowie had worked on in the mid to late 70s, where he was really expressing his love for the sort of German electronic sound that was going on at the time, particularly with bands like Kraftwerk. And granted, Bowie was just kind of doing his own version of it, so it doesn't really break any new sort of ground in that sort of German electronic mold, but he did it so well for, himself being an artist that is so accessible for a lot of people with the various hits that he had prior, the Ziggy persona, the Philly soul stuff from Young Americans, the Thin White Duke, and so on and so forth. I think it could subject a lot of fresh listeners who, let's just say, follow the artist, just on that sole principle alone. So I think being subjected to this album and the beauty that is within it is what has made me almost more interested and intrigued with hearing more ambient music that, let's say Eno would also work with Robert Fripp on from King Crimson. So it's thanks to this record that I started to sort of branch out a little bit just beyond this realm of electronic ambient music and see what else is out there from other people that have kind of tapped into it, as well as its respective originators. Number 17, an In Case of Fire album. Which album would you save from your collection? From a collection that spans over 2,000 pieces, that is an extremely tough one. But if I had to pick one, and this is, I think, the one record that has the most sort of special value to it, despite what stories and other factors play into these records that I have and how I can almost tell a story behind every single one that I have. The one that I would save in case of a fire is this one here. This is a record of my own original music that I was gifted for Christmas a couple of years ago. I actually made a video about it some time ago. Just down to like the moment when I first put this on the turntable and I heard my own songs come through my speakers and just the whole thing of myself on vinyl to begin with. It's a lathe cut record, so it's not like an automated pressed up thing. These are custom one-offs, and it was just a very special thing to behold, given how much I love and admire the vinyl format, and just hand in hand with also at the time with me being somewhat serious with my own music stuff. I haven't really tapped into it too much as of recently. I've sort of shifted my priorities, but it's still a very special thing. And with the exception of one cover, these are all songs that I wrote. Who knows, maybe I'll share some of these more on the channel if you want. I did share one track on here, Redhead Goddess, on the channel as part of the Open Mic Showcase series, but if you want to hear more of my stuff, just let me know. But definitely I would say the most coolest record in my collection, and one that I would 100% save in case of a fire. Number 18, show the best sounding record in your collection. I gotta go with this monolith here. This is Jethro Tull's Aqualung, and this is the UHQR pressing by Analog Productions. I can say so much about this pressing that perhaps has been said already by many other people, and as well as other stereotypical things such as I cried when I listened to it, because I absolutely did. Like, it just sounded that good. Mastered from the tape at 45 RPM across 2 LPs, pressed on Clarity vinyl, housed inside a box with a thick tip-on style textured jacket, leatherette spine. I mean, this is just an absolutely gorgeous product to behold. But obviously, it's down to who it's targeted towards. It's targeted towards the audiophiles with high-end systems that want to hear these certain albums that come out in this deluxe format in the best possible way. And 9 times out of 10, yes, my favorite band is Kiss, and I have multiple pressings, bootlegs, etc. When someone comes over and hears my modest setup, and look, I agree, it's modest, Audio-Technica LP120, Pioneer speakers and an Onkyo receiver, I don't have a VPI Prime, I don't have a Macintosh preamp, whatever. It's modest. But when I put this on for, friends of mine and people that want to hear my setup, it blows it out of the park. And the best way that I could describe this pressing is transparency. Every element of the mix just sounds so crystal clear and it blends in so perfectly. And look, in most cases when I put records on, sometimes like I'm sitting in front of my setup, or I have them on as like background accompaniment as I'm editing videos and doing this and that. This is a pressing that I got to give my 110% undivided attention towards. Number 19, an album you love now but didn't like on your first listen. This is going to be a little bit of a hot take, but I chose Electric Ladyland by the Jimi Hendrix Experience. So when I first approached this album, this was when I was digging my way into the Hendrix catalog. And of course, because it's highly regarded between his catalog as well as just, rock albums in general. But keep in mind, at this point, I had already established that Axis Bold as Love was and still is my favorite Hendrix record. So I approached this blindly. And at first listen, I just felt that it did not, live up to what I had experienced between listening to, Are You Experienced, Axis, as well as albums like Cry of Love and a few others. At first, like some of the longer tracks, such as Voodoo Chile and 1983, A Merman I Should Turn to Be, it just almost felt like I was trudging along the record and I was waiting for those moments that were ready to knock my socks off. Because before I listened to the full album, I knew tracks such as Crosstown Traffic, All Along the Watchtower, Voodoo Child's Light Return. I was like waiting for those moments, but it just felt like I was just kind of, like I said, trudging along. I don't know if it's because I just wasn't feeling it at the time or whatever, but just it wasn't clicking. But then I re-examined this record when I got the deluxe edition box set with the outtakes and the live show, and that's when it registered. And I heard the brilliance in tracks such as Little Miss Strange, Gypsy Eyes, Burning of the Midnight Lamp, House Burning Down, just all out great tunes. And I can see why this album is highly regarded and why it has the reputation that it does. So it goes to show the inaugural listen isn't always that important, but take some time away from it, reapproach it, it registers. Number 20, what is the last record you purchased? So funny enough, the day that I'm filming this video, a package just arrived on my front door of a record that I actually purchased a couple of days ago, actually. So I'm actually shocked that it came so quick. But I'm going to double dip on my favorite band of all time because I think that's fair. That's allowed. That is Kiss, live in Asbury Park, 1975. This right here is a bootleg that came out several years ago. Always had my eye on it, just down to the fact that it was recorded in my home state of New Jersey back in 75. But what I love about this, and I'm going to save this for when I do my next Kiss bootleg haul, is the track list. Because as you see, they pull out some cool kind of, I guess you could call them rarities that they didn't play quite as often as other tracks from this time frame, such as Rock Bottom as well as Let Me Know. So just to have those cool tracks kind of mixed in with sort of the standard set list of the time is a very nice touch. And I've had my eye on this for years, and with time these bootlegs do rack up high in value, and I was able to get a sweet deal on this one, and I'm so stoked to have it in the collection. And that is indeed the last record that I purchased. So there you guys go. That is the youngest members of the VC edition of the 2024 Vinyl Tag. I hope that this video perhaps inspired you to create your own video following this tag. And I speak on behalf of everyone in the youngest members group. We encourage everyone out there to make their own video following this tag that we had a lot of fun working on together. I'm going to drop the prompts down in the description box below, along with links to the other members' respective channels. Around the time that this video goes up, some of the other members will be doing their entries as well. So be sure to subscribe to their channels and give them some love. And as they say, tag, you are it. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next video. And most importantly, keep the records spinning.